are here tonight in our deep dive talking about empowerment and um, using our voice. And I know that I have Ashley here with us to talk some about that this week as we have been doing the chakra series that some of you may have joined in, but I know this week particularly, I believe y'all are talking about throat chakra, which kind of lined up with our whole using our voice and empowerment. And we've talked about this on a number of occasions. You know, we had a whole retreat on empowerment, and I know that a lot of work that people do towards their mental health and well being is finding their voice, going back and looking at things that happened in life that maybe shut our voice down or didn't allow our voice to ever be listened to or heard. And I know a lot of what we do in Live Well is to really try to really be in touch with um, healing from any of the ways we were shut down and opening up to growth in those areas. And so I think this topic kind of speaks to maybe what a lot of people identify with that they've experienced on their journey. So I'm glad for us to be circling back and talking about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So as we get into it, I guess I think looking at maybe leaning into some of your own personal experiences that may come up with disempowerment. I know a word that was coming up for me a lot was um, particularly in some books I'm reading where talks about oppression and um, being held down or kept down. I mean, I know the social justice movements, you know, speak a lot about this, but even in maybe context of your own household growing up, you may begin to identify ways in which you felt like you couldn't speak up or your opinion didn't matter or parts of you were shut down that maybe were originally more creative or explorative that, you know, all of a sudden had to kind of conform to be in a certain kind of way, look in a certain kind of way, talk in a certain kind of way. You know, really that conformity to the family norm or the role that has, you know, feels like it's the safest for you to be. I think maybe where if people are curious about how I got disempowered, those might be some things you want to begin to investigate about your own past. What were the relationships? And maybe your childhood wasn't really where disempowerment happened. It could have been in a later, you know, high school years of bullying or um, feeling like your voice wasn't heard then, or definitely when people sometimes are in relationships that are exploitive or abusive or one sided, people feeling like their needs weren't valued or listened to or met, or maybe even people were abused or mistreated in ways where they were not just oppressed, but were actually abused, certainly shuts down our voice as well. So those are things that kind of come up for me as I am thinking about my own experiences and experiences of people I hear talk about losing their voice or not developing their power. What other things come up for you?
I was thinking while you were talking about the something that you said about families and that piece. I was thinking about that idea that belonging is the strongest drive that we have as human beings, and the ways that families can shut us down. So it can feel like it's not a so-called capital T trauma that happened to you in your childhood, or maybe you had loving parents and stuff like that, but it's still disempowering to be boxed in or reined in, or like you were saying, other modes of self-expression that are not only using your literal voice, but whatever that expression is, which even the most loving and well-intentioned families want to keep you in the right lane so that you will belong, so that you'll actually do the things that will keep you loved, so to speak, by the community. So It's so easy to lose that, whatever your personal power is, whatever your personal light is, which is obviously unique to each of us, gets lost so early on in favor of the behaving that you have to do to just make sure that you're good with everybody. And that comes, not like you were saying, not only from family stuff, but teachers at school, or obviously church, and like, I don't know, just all the ways. And even if those folks intended it for the best, it means losing touch with what is your embodied sense of self and your embodied sense of empowerment. It can be so hard to get back to that. Not to mention the other abuses and things that you were talking about, which are a lot easier to see, but there's this subtle way in which we're kind of disempowered from such a young age.
Yes, it's like when we know this desire, you said the belonging, the need not only for belonging, but for acceptance and approval and um, these inherent things that children, come into the world that, perhaps we're wired for that so that we survive, so that we're not mistreated. It's like it's safer for my existence if I figure out what's going on and how I can best adapt to this and be able to get the love and approval and acceptance that I need so that I'm not at odds with the people around me. And so, I think, that shows up in so many ways. I'm thinking, I mean, like birth order, for instance, just showed up. You'll often hear about, whoever was more outspoken sometimes or had different in family, had to do with what order people even came into this family. And so many things out of our control, I guess, that contribute to that initial, um, you know, coming into the world and determining how strong or weak, for lack of a better word, we feel like our capacity for being ourself is. And I think so much of what we look at is like finding your true self or your authentic self. And because of that conforming to whatever the role is, even in internal family systems language world, when we talk about capital S self, I told the majority of clients what my thought is by two or three, that's pretty well shut down. I mean, that, are even if we even look at crying at an early age to be soothed and put to sleep. And many of us in our generation, were raised with crying it out. Don't 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 respond to a child's needs because they'll be too needy and they want be. I mean, all of that early stuff, I mean, is when our voice is really beginning to be used to get our needs met. And it's, you know, can go a lot of different ways and not all the ways that say, keep speaking up, keep that, keep those lungs bellowing out your vocal cords. I mean, a lot of things that happen early in our lives are shut down, some parenting of or teaching of, don't speak unless you're spoken to, or don't, nobody asked your opinion. When you think about maybe some things that come up for um, anyone listening, just about messages that they got from caregivers or other people of authority in their life that often are children are often quieted. And I mean, we still do that in a lot of ways in our society and schools and coaching and parenting even. But I think the part of empowerment is, how was I shut down, what parts of me were shut down, and how am I going to bring new awareness and energy to that so that my needs can be voiced and expressed, or my desires can be felt. How many times do I hear people say, I don't even know who I am or what I like or where to even start, because I've just done what everybody else needed me to do for 40 years or 50 years. So, I mean, I think about part of this, the big part of the healing journey is being able to free your, free yourself up to begin to explore that and open that up and begin to look at your needs and ask for them to be met and change the expectation, I guess, around silencing versus expressing.
Hmm. Yeah. It is interesting if you start to break it down, like you were saying, for anybody listening, it's just so universal that you, as a kid, are being told to be quiet and behave in different ways. And I think, like, I was thinking while you were talking, I was thinking about women, and I was thinking, ooh, are we going to talk about women and the ways that women are disempowered and lose their voice? But then I was thinking about men, and what it really comes down to is, in part, like in terms of the behaving, is the roles that are cast on us. You know, that happens from a young age, even if you're a student or if you're a whatever, like all the different roles that you already have when you're like 3 or 4 years old. Um, but then as you grow, they shift, but the demands are the same because you still have to slide into whatever that role is. And so if you're a man and you're a provider, whatever, like that type of the stereotype about men and not showing many emotions or something like that's a big, that obviously starts at a young age, but then it shifts, but it doesn't go away because then you have to be the quote unquote strong one in the family or whatever that might be. And women have, you know, been disempowered and lost their voices in lots of other equal ways. And it's just interesting to think about how you learn to slot into the spot where you're needed at a young age. And very often what that has to do with is filling a role which isn't really coming from you, it's coming from outside of you. So it's no
Hmm.
wonder that it takes so long. You're saying that 40 years later people are like, I don't even know what I want. Well, we've done everything to make people not know what they want. We actually don't really show often, well, culturally, I think we don't show each other that the value is internal because we want stuff from each other
Yeah.
culturally. And I
Yeah.
can't, what if what you want is at odds with what the other people around you need?
Yeah. So, I mean, I said oppression earlier. I mean, this is kind of in the suppression, right? Of like holding, shoving down our own self, not even having it shoved down by other, but our own internal mechanism for suppressing our own what I would like to say, but I'm not gonna say. I mean, and if you just listen to people talk and share, I mean, you hear this all the time. I mean, most people, many people in the business meeting or in the dinner with their spouse or at the table with their kids maybe don't authentically just say what it is that they feel or think or believe and have some type of um, very strong filter in place that, and granted, I mean, I guess maybe we're all not supposed to walk around and just tell everybody everything we think and feel, but I just think that the suppression of really, just the holding back that, yes, you're right, men and women, and I think even sometimes men at times more than women because at least women have been having given some type of permission to have emotion over the years and men shut that down. That gets shut down by culture way um early in life for boys. And so yeah, then how do they ever find their emotion again? How does one ever find their voice again or their tears again or their feelings again? Or if someone had a need and expressed it and they were made fun of and then that went way deep down, yeah, that can take a lifetime to get comfortable enough really locating that. So, I mean, and I think a lot of the body work is what really can help people locate where things are stuck and work to, um, bring that out. I think when I hear people talking about, um, talking quietly or having all this tension in their vocal cords, I think all of like the chakra work that you're kind of looking and working with right now is kind of it's like, so what is held down? What is this tension in your voice holding down in your heart, in your belly, like what lives in there that you're afraid of coming out, that you're clenching in this area so that it won't be seen or heard, or is that fear of him being made fun of or shut down or losing somebody or being isolated from the group, um, but yeah, I think so many of us hold things back, and then our body begins to sometimes show up tension in those areas that can bring concern.
Mhm. I mean, so what do you think as a therapist about, like, what are the ways that we can develop, what are the ways that we can safely develop that type of expression? Like you're saying, if people are sitting around the dinner table and they want to, let's say that you want to just have a boundary or something, like someone says something offensive and you just want to, for years you've just held your tongue and you're just don't bother grandma or whatever it is, and then but finally, because you're wanting to live more authentically, you actually want to say something, but adjacent to that is your compassion and you don't want to hurt other people's feelings or whatever the thing is. Like, how do we safely train ourselves to be authentically expressive in ways that are not hurtful? Sometimes when I do things like that, I blurt them out because it feels so good just to be like blah, and then I'm like, oh crap, I shouldn't have said that. How do we develop that muscle?
Yeah, I mean, I think practice first, and as with everything we talk about developing, we're talking about a new pathway into yourself and out of yourself. Like we're having to develop this whole new neural pathway to begin to have the insight and then to begin to have the expression. And I mean, I think that the therapy room, the community, like we have at LiveWell, where when we have groups of people together, we try to foster a supportive environment where people can speak up and say things that maybe because it tends to be a little safe space created by a group or a safe space created in a therapy room to where people can begin to whisper it, get in touch with it, practice it, say it, and then ultimately over time, you know, find other people that you feel safe with to express, say, see that it's okay, and then building safety in ourselves so that even if we're in a setting maybe that doesn't feel safe, whether that's the dinner table or the office meeting, that we've had enough practice that we're like, I can get this out. I can say this. And I know not everyone is going to reject me. I know I'm going to be okay. And I'm okay to have this feeling or this belief or this view about this situation. And I am confident enough to try that out because I practiced it and I didn't fall on my face. I mean, so I think the bravery, the confidence comes with, I told one person and they didn't laugh, and I feel like in a therapy office, that's often what we provide for people is I told somebody the thing and they listened and respected and saw it and witnessed it and felt about it with me and understood that I have the feelings I have about it. I mean, I think we can get that in therapy. If we have the right therapist, we can get that in groups of people that maybe think similarly, feel similarly. And, by getting more comfortable, we can open up more and more, to our family, to, a greater, larger group of people. So, I mean, I think that beginning work of practicing knowing what it is through the insight work, um, and practicing it with just another human is really, I think, an part, important big step in the direction towards that.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that idea. It's like a muscle. I mean, it really, using your voice it is a practice.
Well, and I think in yoga, how there's so many ways of expression, different breath techniques, different movements, different noises that come with different breaths or positions, um, that are there to help people get that energy, know it in your body and get it, bring it out and not just hold it in. So, I mean, I think communicating is a way to do that, and also that embodiment of feeling what it is in your body. You hear people, if you want to get something out, scream into a pillow, whatever. I mean, there is that energetic expression of the energy that we are suppressing that does need to come out. And so doing things to help that happen, whether it's the work in therapy, whether it's doing your own journaling and your own introspection to begin identifying what your feelings are and how to understand yourself better. If it's reading or listening to, um, inspirational people that kind of line up with um, aspects you identify with, and hearing them tell, you know, use their voice to express themselves can inspire you. Oh, if they did it, I can do it. I think there's different ways to get at it. It doesn't have to be in a therapy room, but I do think that that's one of the gifts about podcast or social media, or being able to see other people express themselves and it be okay. Um, it's like, well, if they get away with saying how they feel, I can too. So I do think that sometimes listening to people, if you hear someone tell their story, share their experience, that can be very motivating. For instance, like in AA and substance abuse treatment, I mean, that's used a lot. Hearing somebody's story can really help someone feel like they're not alone and they're not the only one with this experience. And so they're going to be more motivated to be open about their own pain, suffering, or process of living, because they get that, oh, other people too. I mean, kind of like the whole Me Too movement. I mean, why did more and more people come forward in that movement? Because they identified with the the expression of the truth that was happening. And oh, if they can tell what happened, I can too. And it can be okay to speak up. And so, I mean, I think that that collective energy about speaking up can really be powerful.
Mhm. I love what you're saying about the energetic piece too, that we think that communicating using words is the only way to practice what you're talking about. And it's not necessarily true that you have to use words or do it with other people. I mean, there are other things you can do. Silka is great about that too. Of course, you know that she connects those sounds to
Hmm.
movement and stuff. I love the way she does that. The other day we did that S sound. You know how on an
Hmm.
exhale you'll do the S
Hmm.
to unlock something. It was just I'm always fascinated by the work she does with that. So for other people who are interested in that, Silka's an awesome resource for that. And then a thing that I did for a while earlier this year um, was the Satnam meditation. Have you ever done that Gabby
Mm.
does?
Mm-mm.
So good. I got it from Gabby Bernstein, but when you're meditating, instead of just trying to kind of calm your mind or to have a focal point, it's just one of those like affirmation type meditations. But the language is Sat Nam,
Okay. Yeah.
roughly translates to truth is my name.
Hmm.
And it was so powerful for me because I was trying to do some work around speaking truth, not only speaking, but whatever the authentic version of that is. But then because it's not words that are English words, and because they're both just the one syllable, you can just inhale. And then even if you feel silly at first, which it wears off, but then as meditating on the exhale, you just kind of chant it like Sat Nam or whatever, and actually doing that for like 10 minutes, I would feel like I was releasing something through that. You can even just do it in your mind, I think. But truth is
Mm-hmm.
my name is a great mantra for that type of thing too, as far as empowering.
Yes. Yes, I love that. And another example of practicing, the practicing, the rehearsing, the um of these reminders that uh, um can help free up some of the inhibition, or if this is a new thing, like the more that you wake up and tell yourself, the affirmation or the statement or the intention, the more it sounds. I mean, we basically, like, we want to reject things that don't feel normal or accustomed to us. So it's like we have to tell ourselves the thing, give ourselves the message, practice the thing enough to where it becomes the, auto default. Because otherwise, if freezing is your auto default and every time you feel uncomfortable, you freeze, you're never going to speak up, whether that's to your spouse or parent or boss or whatever. If you're always freezing, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's like the only way to begin to we have to feel safe, we have to work through that freeze response, and then we have to begin practicing. When I feel freeze, that lets me know I begin to do whatever it is that I need to do that's going to help me have a new response. Because, vocal cords freezing, I mean, that's, we call it stage fright or whatever. I got up to speak and I didn't have any words. I mean, our fear center blocks our, what is it, Broca center, the area in our brain where our words are formed. I mean, it blocks that. So, I mean, we can't access it when we have fear and anxiety. So, I mean, we have to learn calming and soothing techniques for ourselves. And then we have to build our confidence, and so that we can begin to use our voice effectively in our personal life, in our professional life, in the community for advocacy, all the ways that we can then, I mean, once we are safe and calm and can express, um, we can, really begin speaking up. But I mean, it requires the practice, whether it's the Satnam, like you said, or, is it saying a certain prayer that brings you um, some sense of confidence? Is there a certain, um, mantra, positive affirmation that you've developed? Is there the certain book that you read or passage that you read that every time you read it, you're like, I know, I hear you talk about so many different authors. I mean, I think about, like, okay, is it Maya Angelou? Like, who is the person? Is it Martin Luther King? Who is the person that when you listen to their words and remember what they did and what they brought towards empowerment, that it motivates you to get over that initial discomfort and just be you and be true and speak up and be seen and heard, which is what so many of us spend a lot of our life trying to not be seen and heard. But hopefully, on the other side of a healing journey, um, you are being seen and heard.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that about those people that you can use for inspiration too. And you just brought up those two, but like a bunch of other ones came to mind, not just writers, but I mean, from Jesus to Martin Luther King to like whoever, but you're you can notice about each of those people that they're not like any other people. It's always interesting to me that we work so hard to make ourselves palatable and to gain that approval or whatever from other people around us, when we know that the people who broke ground, whom we admire so much, were the people who did find that truth in themselves. And I just think it's so important for everybody to realize that they're not more special than anybody else. They just were able to get to that truth inside themselves and then get over that freeze. I think all those people were probably afraid at different moments, but I think we don't trust that we have that specialness in us.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we don't, because that's what we've been told all along. But the thing that we lose is that we begin to feel that the approval is the most important thing, when actually what might be true is that you might be wasting time. You might be the world's next genius. Like, who knows? You going against the grain is where it's at anyway.
Right. And yes, I think fear is, probably the root of all problems, but certainly this one in particular is, how do we get through the fear block? And that often requires doing some of the hard work on your trauma of the past where the fear got locked in. as that protective mechanism. Because if you are a person who has a hard time speaking up and you were parented in a way that said, particularly, I'm going to be hit or choked, or if you witnessed your mother or grandmother or someone choked or quieted or physically harmed because of what they said that was reacted to in that way, it is going to take healing your body, because the body response is, I will get hurt if I speak up. And if your body believes speaking up leads to hurt, there has to be body work for your body to relax in that moment of discomfort. And we have those tools and resources available, which is what I think is so awesome, and why I really have developed our lifeline to look the way it looks, is because it's exactly what all the trauma experts say, is that we have to let our body become safe to relax and be able to express itself. Otherwise, we can will just stay shut down. And anyone who has known that sensation and overcome that knows that that can take years of intentional work to be able to speak up and know that, and still know that you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And that nervous system work is so, so deep. I mean, as you know, I don't have to tell you that, but I was just talking to a friend about that today. And we were just talking about how being with your family can bring up all those things, because even though you're a lot older now, all that stuff still lives in your body, obviously, in some way. And so you can intellectually get through the experiment of staying with them for several days. But then when you leave, you may have this physical fallout that is, you know, that is your nervous system just releasing whatever that stuff was. It fascinates me how long and hard that work can be to prove to your nervous system that there is safety.
Hmm.
So when I say that about everybody having their own unique light, that does sound rather pie in the sky compared to what I understand is the real truth, which is that it feels unsafe for people. That is, but as you're always pointing out, the only way around that is, or I think the best way around that is that physical work, the somatic work.
Hmm. Yes, to go through it. And many, those of us on here tonight have, you know, already done a lot of that, um, and experienced that and have seen the benefits of it. And I hope that anybody new who may be listening piques their curiosity enough to say, okay, I'm going to try some of these things that don't understand how they work, or maybe it seems too weird or woo woo or not for me. It's like these practices that can really help you have a full, whole body enjoyment of life experience. I mean, we have to get through all the discomfort and pain and um, growing pains to get to the top of the Everest. I'll say a lot of times that this healing work is like climbing Mount Everest, and the and the climb up Mount Everest, people begin with some excitement and curiosity, and then midway get very tired and sometimes out of resources, and some turn around and go back and are too afraid to keep going, and some, continue. And once you get above, I'll describe to people, once you get above the cloud level to where you're on the other side and you're seeing the peak, and that, there's, you're about to see all that you've hoped for. And I mean, I just think that healing journey, I mean, it's it's exciting initially, and then it gets real hard, and then if you keep going, I mean, you can really get to the top of the Everest and see it all and let it all begin to be clear, make sense, and come together. So hopefully anybody who's new and weary or um, scared to take the first steps maybe can step out and do some things that might help them become more empowered in using their voice. So but yeah, so thanks for chatting with me about that. Any last words of you? Are you good to open up, see if anyone has any questions or comments?
No, I'm
Well,
good.
first, I'll just say if anyone who's on tonight wants to say anything while we're recording, jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording. But I feel like, and the last time we did this, someone was had some really good wisdom that they shared, and I was like, I'm so glad they were okay with that being recorded because our community can often have much more insights than even some of us
Mm.
LiveWell guides. So, if anybody on has anything to add that you want in our talk, or otherwise, I'm going to stop this and we can answer any questions or hear any feedback or move on our journeys.
Okay, so it's me. I
Okay.
do have some questions about, because I have heard this from other people about
Mm-hmm.
how you can use body movement or yoga to unlock feelings and emotions that are stored or blocking different things. A friend of mine asked me not too long ago if I cried when I did yoga. I've never cried in a pose, even when it's a pose that you're where you're like a fully supported, just find what's feeling good and just feel whatever you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
um and she was telling me about this experience she had in a pose where she was really opening her hips, and like there was all this emotion that started coming up for her, and I was like, no, I've never ever experienced that ever. What are you talking about? So if even if you could talk about that a little bit more. And like,
Well,
I'm not going to say that what am I doing wrong, but like maybe I'm not thinking, um,
so
maybe I'm not asking myself the right questions as I'm in a pose, or anyway, just elaborate on that.
that's a great question. And everyone processes differently. And what your friend talked about experiencing can be very common because sometimes for the first time, people are getting in touch with their body in yoga or in whatever body practice they're doing. So it's the first time they're actually being present and conscious and allowing, when I mean conscious, I mean like connected, not dissociated from whatever is there. And some people, and I'm not saying this is your experience, but many of us are so able to separate ourselves from discomfort as a protective mechanism that's worked so for so many years that really locating our emotion in our body takes a lot more effort, time. Um, I don't know how I would say, like, for instance, if there's an ice cube that that's this big and it's at room temperature, it's going to melt a lot faster than an ice cube that's this big that maybe has gotten more and more water and frozen more and more over time. That, some of us, I mean, and I'm in the category that I'm describing, that it's so easy for me to shut down emotion, either because that's how, I was raised, what my experience was professionally. It's easier, whatever, like it's easier for me to disconnect. And so because some of us can disconnect a lot over time from our sensations, it really takes a while to be able to access it. And so I just um that's what's coming up for me. And I use the word dissociation a lot because sometimes we dissociate from discomfort so much, finding that pathway to what actually the feeling is, particularly in our body. If I'm used to not listening to my body, that can it can just be a much different timeline for different people depending on their past experience. So don't feel like you're doing anything wrong um, by any stretch. I do think that if you continue with the practice, you will at some point begin noticing more emotion and sensation. That's just my hunch, but you may not at this point. And not saying that your friend, if she went to her first yoga class and cried, did anything any better. Something just hit her and she was at a place that she didn't have enough, she didn't have her own internal guards up or barriers that, kind of limited or slowed down her ability to do that. I may not be saying all those words just right, but I'm finding myself wanting to assure you that you're not doing anything wrong and that don't be surprised that it very well will probably happen someday if you continue to go to body practices. But I don't know, Ashley, you've obviously been teaching yoga for years, and I'm just speaking as a bystander and as a participant. But
No, I mean, you know more than I do about all that, a lot of that somatic stuff. And also I think that ice cube image is a really good one. I would say that, in the overall the years that I've been practicing and teaching yoga, that my experiences that have been very emotional have been very few. So there are people who get very emotional in yoga and there are people who don't. And in some cases, I think what you're saying about the dissociation, I mean, I too relate to what you're saying about kind of just being separate from being able to block those emotional responses reflexively. So it doesn't feel like you're blocking them, but it's just kind of something that's happening. I can relate to that very much, but also, a lot of times because I know that a lot of other people are having releases of various sorts when they're doing somatic practices, I always feel like I'm doing it wrong. I always feel like, is this not intense enough? Should I be focused on something different? And so, patience is just so important when you're doing any of that kind of work, because like what you were saying, Erin, about the timeline is different for everybody. That's definitely true. And I think that it's really easy to use yoga or other practices to beat yourself up when it doesn't feel like you're having the same experience that other people seem to have. Leslie, maybe that's not true for you about the beating yourself up, but for me, I often have felt in the past like I'm supposed to feel more right now, and I don't. But everything that Erin was saying, I think, is also really so useful. But just keeping doing it. I think the other thing that is nice about yoga that allows that stuff to come up is your ability to allow yourself to kind of feel safe and feel supported. For me, some of those emotional moments would come up mainly during like the resting period at the end, when I was finally still. And I knew that somebody else was going to tell me when it was time to get up, and I had nothing left to do but just lie there. And all of a sudden, breathing deeply, I would feel like, oh my gosh, there's something trembling inside of my stomach or whatever, where that's when the thing happened. Just because I didn't have anything to do. All I had to do was lie there, and that's very unusual for us. So
Yeah.
maybe a restorative practice could be really useful that way too. Not that I'm not saying you're looking to have that experience, but like sometimes when someone else holds the space and all you have to do is lie there, you can be surprised by how emotional that gets.
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, you might want to think about, how much emotion did I release as a kid, as a teen, in college, and early life. Like um, if you have a difficult time being emotional overall, chances are you're going to have that's not going to come, without a lot of intention and practice, because there's a lot of safeguards around that.
Oh, for
If you're
sure.
someone who is very emotional all the time, then yoga may not evoke much emotion because you got it all out already.
You know what?
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
remember being older, I guess preteen, teenager, anytime strong feelings would come up, I would feel things. My response was I needed to just find an open space and run until I didn't feel the feeling anymore. but
Yeah,
I didn't deal with it. I didn't face
yeah,
anything. The circumstances didn't change. I would just like not punish myself, but just
run from it.
run and run and run until I
Well,
didn't
guess
feel it.
what? Guess what? Even if your legs aren't running right now, your
Yeah,
brain is still running from discomfort. And so
yeah,
because you're able to identify that, you have that window of opening into understanding that, yeah, I historically ran from my feelings. So leaning into my feelings is not natural. And it's going to take a lot of compassion, a lot of permission, a lot of safe spaces, a lot of nurturing people around you to really be able to um, let yourself feel normal leaning into those feelings instead of, moving away from them.
yeah.
I don't know if this is true for you, Leslie, either, but like something that's really safe for me to feel is anger. And sometimes it hasn't happened in a long time, but I practiced yoga for a long time and poses would piss me off, or I would have like an angry reaction to something that now when I look back on it, I'm thinking, oh, that was the only safe way for me to have feelings sort of bubble up in my body. And rather than interpreting them, um, in a way that would have made me feel too vulnerable or something, I let it just be frustration or anger or impatience or something like that. And I think that that's a possibility too. Does that make sense, Erin? In terms of nervous
Yeah.
system stuff,
Yes.
it's safer just to have it be something that's not tears. I mean, for me,
Hmm.
tears were like the ultimate, like, no way, I'm not doing this in a room full of people, but I didn't mind just getting privately frustrated or whatever.
Yeah. I mean,
But
certain emotions definitely feel safer than others, and anger often can feel easier to access than the softer underbelly of those feelings. So, um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
that
I
makes
hope
a
that
lot of
was
sense to
helpful.
me.
Yeah, any other question, comment?
No, that was my biggest question about, but it makes sense and kind of gives me a direction to go in as far as using movement to find my voice, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yes. And you may want to try some things that you haven't tried. The power rhythm, for instance, the drumming thing, which those of you who
Mhm.
have attended that before, Jessica's getting published. She's getting her dissertation work published in the journal, so she's excited. But you might want to try something that's different that you haven't done. Like Ashley said, if you typically do more, yes, Jessica's workshop's tomorrow night. If I said that wrong, at 5:30. The if you haven't done restorative and you typically do more active, or um, and you also may want to think about, I don't know, for some people, for instance, you'll hear say, I like to watch this movie because it makes me cry. So you might think about certain actresses or movies or things that elicit emotional responses. It might not be yoga that brings that up, but it might be tuning into that through some other practice, music or a song, a particular song or a particular movie. So that can help
Okay.
get
Yeah,
ready.
that's a good idea. So just feeling the feeling is good. It doesn't really matter if it's
Yes.
elicited by a song or a
Yeah.
movie or some
Yeah.
other artificial situation. It's just good to
Right.
feel the feeling and get
Yeah.
used to the feeling again.
You don't have to do the feeling in a yoga class. It can just
Okay.
be a way that it comes out and helps you get in touch with your body, particularly people who've had been disconnected from their body and emotions. A yoga practice can help you get back in your body to begin to understand what its sensations are. But yes, if you
Oh,
watch the movie and you feel the tension in your throat come up and your tears start choking back, and you're like, instead of choking back these tears, I'm going to swallow or cough and release and allow these tears instead of holding it back because I don't know if the person next to me is going to see me crying or identify with me.
Yeah.
It's like giving yourself permission to express what comes up when it's elicited by whatever it is elicited by.
Okay.
I think that body awareness piece is so important that you're saying, Erin. It's like even during a movie or whatever it is, that once you get to that aspect of mindfulness, which is that you notice the thickness in your throat or whatever, because when you are kind of disconnected from your body's expression of emotions, you're not even paying attention to the stuff that happens. Like maybe it leads to tears, but you're not seeing the first 10 moments of whatever that might be. And once you start to tune into what that is, then you see it in other places, and as you react to other things that you
Yeah.
just don't even notice because you're so good at choking it down. And if you're consciously releasing, it goes back to the practice thing that you were talking about earlier too, about practicing using your voice, just practicing letting those emotions flow. I think that from a chakra perspective, coming from heart, like you were describing, the throat is almost like it's like a gate. It really is like a gate. And so are you letting what's happening from down below come up, or are you pushing it back down, is a really good way of thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of allowing a lot
Yeah.
of feelings happen in the throat and we don't even know about it.
Yeah. And most of us women, have the tension in the neck, shoulder, throat, thyroid issue, whatever. I think I'll often say what's happening above the neck or below the neck. And it's like this is kind of a place that shuts off the rest. And we hold so much tension in that area because we're not free to say, don't talk to me like that. I don't appreciate that, or whatever the response needs to be that we're choking at.
And you think something as simple as just a cough or clearing your throat is enough to at least get that release started?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow.
It is absolutely true. I can attest to that. You probably can too, Erin.
Yeah.
Just coughing, clearing your throat for sure. It seems silly, but actually, the thickness in your throat that you feel is, I don't know if this is the right word, but it feels like it is neurological. It's not only when you're sick, so something's going on there, and you got to kind of get the gunk out.
Yes.
I also love breath work for that, but we don't do a lot of breath work around here. Well, in Tuscaloosa, even at Lifeline, we haven't done that much breath work stuff, but breath work is a great way to release a lot of emotion too. Maybe these days.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all you just never know what the thing is going to be that really helps open the window or the door for you. So it's like you practice new things. That's what I love about our self-care toolkits is, you can look at what are the things I haven't really played with much and seen if that elicits this other response or helps me get more in touch with this or that. So, play around with all the variety of things and as you're experimenting, that's just more practice to accessing what it is you're trying to find and helping with your insight, helping with your understanding. So just keep exploring and trying different things.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated the talk tonight.
Yeah, glad you were
And thanks for
here.
answering my questions.
Thanks everyone for being here and for joining me tonight, Ashley. And look forward to your Friday morning throat chakra class.
Thank you.
All right. Well, y'all have a good night and